Hey guys, this is Eric Ronover from Nerdy Geek Talk, the source of all your nerdy geeky needs, here with episode 5 of Why Eric Why. And this episode is about why do I like Generations. Now, it's not just Generations, technically, it's kind of complex to nail down exactly what it is. So I'm just going to say whatever you think of as Chug, classics, Generations, that kind of stuff. Also third party stuff that is meant to be in that scale, that kind of thing. It's all considered in that. I'm mainly talking about official products because some of my things have to do with official product pricing, stuff like that. But in general, that style is why I like those type of toys, which third party can be included, but again, some things will be excluding that. So diving right down into it, the reasons are, so one, quantity. I like how many toys can be made with Generations. Now, it's not as many as per se, maybe, well, it's kind of tough because Marvel Legends, it depends how many are in a wave, because, if you get a wave of four deluxes with one Voyager, one Leader, and like two Legends class figures, then that's the amount of figures that would be in one wave of Marvel Legends. But if it's a new launch, so like a first wave of a new toy line, you're gonna have two Leaders, two Voyagers, four Deluxes, maybe sometimes even five, um, three or four Legends, and then we also have a new price point like Prime Master, Titan Master, where you can have anywhere from three to four. So that's a lot more figures. Again, there are toy lines where you can get even more figures because they get waves more often, but in general, it's it's a decent amount. I like it. It's way more figures than you get for per se Masterpiece, where you only get a couple figures a year. Generations, you get a lot of figures throughout the years. So you have a lot of choices too. Now, I like to get all of them because I just like the line. I like it in general. I like all of them for the most part. There's a few exceptions, but um, Masterpiece, if you don't like one or two of the figures that are coming out that year, you're missing at least half of them. So, yeah, third party means that there's more Masterpiece figures, but in general, if you're just talking Masterpiece line, if you don't like a couple of the figures, that's a lot. That's a huge chunk of the year. Um, but yeah, there's several of them, and that's kind of why I like them is because how many there are to choose from, but also I like just getting more toys, and so it works out where, excuse me, where Masterpiece is there's a very high quality, but very few, whereas Generations, I still think the quality's there. It's not as complex or detailed, but I still think quality's there. But there's far more, so quantity is far up. Um, Aside from that, next I'd probably have to say is gimmicks. Now the reason this is kind of lower on my list is because it's not for all generations. Not all generations have had gimmicks. This is only the past couple of years, but I like seeing gimmicks that were applied to classic characters that were classic gimmicks back in the day, like headmasters, combiners, stuff like that. And I like it being updated in generations where they kind of perfect it. Now it's not always perfect, but they make it better, but also they apply it to new characters, so characters that haven't had that done before. So now you have let's say, like you have a headmaster, Trigger Happy, who used to be a target master, but now he's a headmaster. So it's neat like that, and also things where, let's say, Wheeljack is now a combiner limb because of Combiner Wars, stuff like that, where they take classic characters and classic gimmicks, but combine them in a way that hasn't necessarily been done before for that specific character, and I like that. I think it's neat. I think it keeps both of them fresh by mixing them. And also, I do like the fact that they're homaging, older gimmicks, but also different older characters. They're killing two birds with one stone, and usually they work out well. Next thing I have to probably say is the price slash size, and they go hand in hand. The size is because they're smaller than It's smaller than Masterpiece scale because, and that's why they're cheaper. Is because they're smaller. That's one of the reasons why they're cheaper. If they were a Masterpiece scale, but still Generation style, like quality, detail, stuff like that, then they'd be more expensive. Not as expensive Masterpiece, but they'd be more expensive than they are. I like the scale they're at now, all the way from Leader down to Legends, well, actually all the way down to Prime Master or Titan Master now. But I like the variety in size that we have and price points, but I mainly just like that it's not they're not as big for the most part. Leaders are kind of the exception as would be in a Masterpiece collection, and therefore it keeps things simple and good for kids because they can only have toys that are so big for characters that aren't meant to be that big. I mean, not that they care, but they can only have toys that are so big or so expensive, and it keeps the price down to have them smaller. So I like that. Um, my next favorite thing is probably styling. Now, this varies from design team to design team because it changes every so often, and each design team has their own take on characters. So sometimes we'll get versions of characters that are um, clearly classic inspired, but it's a new take on them, like Deluxe Grimlock, for example, from classics. Like, that is a new take on classic Grimlock. Still classic Grimlock, but it's a new take. Also, Thrilling 30 Springer is another one where it's a classic character, clearly influenced by classic Springer, but it has a new take on it. And a lot of that, I also like how they do IDW stuff mixing in there because that is IDW does do a lot of stuff where it's their own style, but it's clearly their own stylized version of G1 aesthetics, which is neat. Now, recently we've been getting a lot of stuff that is like G1 with articulation and more detail, and I still like it, but I like things to be a bit more stylized than they are currently right now, but I still like it because they don't look the exact same as the classic toys. And so, a lot of that detailing really makes things pop. I really like it. I think it's a way to, especially when they go a bit deeper and, add their own takes, which is something I would like to do when I am in toy design eventually, is to, really go off and still keep the essence, the classic essence, but go with a new take, a new direction, new look with that classic essence, which I think is one of the coolest things when it's pulled off right. It's not always pulled off right, which, it's fine. I also do like style, and this kind of goes in style, this kind of goes in just in general with the line. It's hard to fit it into one of my points, but coming up with new characters. Like I like Alpha Bravo, I like Rook, I like Off-Road. They were put in Combiner Wars. They didn't exist before. They are new characters that came out of there. I think that has to do with the style of keeping it classic looking, but and also Slash. Dinobot Slash is the newest example. Technically there was a Slash in the movie, but where this character that wasn't in G1 is now with a G1 team and fits in the aesthetic, but it's a new character, and so I really like that. I think that's part of the style for me. I like it when they do it with characters that already existed, but I also love it. I absolutely love it when they do it with new characters. They bring in a new character with the classic styling so they fit in. It's one of the neatest things. That is one of my favorite things. But my absolute favorite part about Generations is the transformation slash the complexity. Now, there are definitely ends of the spectrum where you have like one-step changers now, where they are very, very simple, very, very cheap, stuff like that, and they're very, very good for kids, and they're great. They are great for what they do. I buy very few. I bought some, but very few. They're not my cup of tea. I still like them, but very few. Masterpiece, I have a few more figures than I do of one-step changers. Actually, it's almost even. But again, it's one of those things where they're really, really good at what they do. They are aimed for collectors, not little kids. But it's very, very complex. All that they take forever to transform. Meanwhile, one-step changers take 2 seconds to transform. You don't have to really transform them at all. It just takes one quick step, stuff like that. But Generations is that sweet spot for me. Not everyone. Not everyone likes it that way. But for me, I really like the simple but unique. Like it's not one step, so it's not just over. But you get to enjoy, you get to do it, but it's quick enough that you could still play with it. So, you could transform a car real quick into a robot and then transform it back, and it doesn't take you a solid 10, 20 minutes, depending on the masterpiece figure, stuff like that. But in all fairness, it can do a lot more, still has articulation, unlike one-step changers. So it is that sweet spot for me. Where I still like some one-step changers. I still like some masterpieces, but I do not have nearly the amount of either of those, not even remotely close, as I do of Generations, because that's my sweet spot. I really like it, and I also love that they can include whoever they want in Generations. That's why it's called Generations. It's not just G1 characters, not just Beast Wars characters, it's not just Robots in Disguise characters, it's whoever they want from the past years. Now, a lot of the time they go G1, but it's who's on the design team. They get to make the decisions. It can be whatever they want. It's an open book, and it can be new characters, like I mentioned. Generations is a thing where you can mix as much as you want. You can go in whatever, it gives you this freedom to go in whatever direction you want. Whereas Masterpiece, you are stuck to the source material, and it's good for what it is. I'm not trying to diss it or anything. I love it for what it is. Generations is this part of me that I love that it's a bit more creative because Masterpiece is beautiful. Masterpiece is amazing to pull off. But Generations is a new direction, depending on, again, design team, stuff like that, what direction it goes. But it can do whatever it wants. It's an idea that can never be ultimately defined as one thing because it can constantly be changing. And one-step changers can do the same, but they're typically just for newer series. They aren't doing one-step changers of G1 characters, like meant to be G1 characters, or Beast Wars, stuff like that. They're pretty much doing just the newer series, the newer movies, stuff like that. Whereas Generations can have newer stuff, movie figures they really want, and classic stuff. Meanwhile, Masterpiece is pretty much just classic stuff, moving into Beast Wars, but still not anything brand new with the exception of movie Masterpiece. You aren't getting Robots in Disguise 2016, 2017 series Masterpiece figures, nor should you because it's not where the market's aimed. But yeah, those are the reasons why I love Generations or whatever you consider in between. As for third party in that area, I still like third party Chug stuff. It doesn't necessarily meet my requirements for the pricing that I said, where I highlight like it's cheaper. I mean, Generation style third party figures tend to be cheaper than some of the Masterpiece style figures, but it also depends on the company, so it gets complicated there. But in general, if they keep their transformation similar, like Coulter, the MMC's Tarn, I like that. That fits perfectly in Generations. More expensive, but the transformation, especially, it fits into that, all those reasons that I said that I like a lot. So, yeah, that's pretty much about it for this episode. So, thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. And I think that's about it. So, thanks. Bye.